So we have been in, this is basically, we kind of ended as far as the sermons of the series that last week on Follow, because our mission as a community isn't to make more Christians or get everybody on the right political stance and Second Amendment stance and all the things that in our culture we have seemed to somehow define you're a Christian if you believe these certain things, but actually to make fully devoted followers of Jesus. But if you don't know what does it mean to follow, then you can be confused or make it something that it's not. So we've been over the last 7 weeks defining from the Gospels, from the life of Jesus, what does it mean to follow. We even learned some very important lessons from Judas when we try to use God for our own ends and to try and get Him to play to our agenda. We've learned that as far as when it comes to following, that salvation that is free, but that following Jesus will eventually cost us something. We've talked about about following Jesus, where Jesus asks this very, very important question of all of us: why are you afraid? Because in the moment, one of the moments, the boat is sinking. There is a storm, and we are about to drown, and Jesus is taking a nap in the storm. They wake him, and his question after he calms the storm was, why were you afraid? And so we learned all these things. So if you missed any of this or haven't been part of it, you can go back and you can listen to the podcast or watch these online. But this morning, I feel like, I can talk about it and I can even teach about it and teach from Scripture about it. But there's something about personal story. And so there's a young woman, her name is Thao. And Thao and I met actually a few years ago when she connected to another young adult group that I was leading. And we got to know each other a little bit. And then, she struck me right off. I mean, this is both, an intelligent, beautiful in many ways individual, and also like she is a passionate follower of Jesus. And then had the opportunity not long ago to hear even more in depth her story. And I just sat there kind of silent as I just took it in of what she shared. And I actually asked her to come and share, and I debated on whether do a little bit of video and then interview or whatever. And in talking with her, she's articulate, she communicates well. And honestly, I just didn't want to get in the way of her just telling her story, because I believe that her story encapsulates everything that we've talked about over the last few weeks when it comes to trusting in a benevolent God and in following Jesus. And so I don't want to take anything away from what Thao has to say, so I'm going to invite her to come on up. And I just, And Thao she's going to, basically, like I said, she's just going to give her story. And so I just want you to listen. And we actually prayed before this morning that honestly that each one of you would be able to hear what you needed to hear, that you would be able to walk out of here changed with fresh hope, new hope, the beginning of healing, whatever it might be. So thanks for being here this morning. All right. Yeah, shake, hug, we don't know.
Hello, everybody. Morning, church. I just want to say thank you for having me here today. Like Pastor Chacha, I've met him in 2014 on February 14th, so on Valentine's Day. We've been through quite a bit since he's counseled me through a lot, and so I'm very, very grateful for him. You've got a great shepherd here at this church. So before we go into anything serious, I just want to introduce a little bit about myself. My name is Thao, and I'm 23 years old, so not too up there in age, but enough to kind of tell you a little bit about my story. I grew up in Vietnam. I moved here to the U.S. when I was 12 years old. The place where I came from, I actually grew up in a tribal village. What you would say, they were a different color skin. They didn't dress the same. They spoke a totally different language. The reason why we were there was because my dad was a pastor. He was part of this organization called Christian Missionary Alliance. And what he did in his ministry, he helped him and his family brought Christianity into the south of Vietnam. Christianity was considered an American religion. And so because we lost the Civil War, that everything that was related to Americans was looked down upon. But, that didn't stop him. It didn't stop his family. We traveled to so many places. Houses got burnt down. We were forced to move over and over and over again. We never had a place to call home. And so we ended up in pretty much the woods. We lived at the bottom of mountains. And as Dad was clearing out land, he ran into this tribe. And we kind of got adopted. And Mom was a grade school teacher, so she taught them Vietnamese. And we communicated, we'd share the gospel with them. And we actually learned a little bit of their language and communicated with them. So that was a little bit about my story. We built a lot of churches. They were burnt down, we would build them again. They were burnt down, we build them again. Bibles, we couldn't carry Bibles around. We had to tear them up in pages, and we would hide them in our clothes, in our pockets. And then every time we would have Bible study, and the cops would bust in, and we had to kind of burn them away so they wouldn't have any evidence to hold against us. So I have some pictures here to show you a little bit what life was like back in Vietnam. And this is probably one of my very, very, very few baby pictures. I'm the sixth one of the family, so by the time they had me, I was like, no more pictures, there's enough, right? So that was our home, afterwards, when I was about, I think, 8 or 9 years old. So you can go ahead and move on from that. So my dad is the far one, that far side, the shortest one there. This is the group that helped translated the English Bible into the Vietnamese Bible. So he was part of that. You can go ahead and move on to the next one. And this is when the church has been established in different villages. And we're walking into a different village here, and you can see little kids, they're bare feet. They're actually wearing the same clothes. So they've been supported by certain organizations, and they're all just kind of been wearing the same clothes. So this is part of his mission. And now, this is what the church looks like now. Even though we don't have a legit, building, but they come. And imagine Kansas heat, 100 degrees outside. This is what they do every single weekend. They sit out here and they have service outside every weekend, and it's filled. So you can see now it's under the night sky. It's amazing. God has done really good work. So this is the current pictures now. You can go ahead and move on to the next one. So this is a church that is built. It's not even a real wall. They're really just kind of really thin material wood, and they kind of wove them together, and they put up these churches. And this is how they meet. And they don't have really anything, and they come, and every single weekend is filled. This is what it looks like. The tarp in the back is for it's a tarp. So this is how they worship, and this is how they do things back then. And so this is one of the villages that we have ministered to. And so Dad has actually went into one of this village and built a church here, and they still have that church there. So I've actually had to collect these pictures from a very, very close friend of mine who still lives there and who still does ministry in these areas. And so this is a church now. So they've built an actual building, and there's people. We do a lot of stuff. A lot of the Christian faith had just impacted these lives so greatly. And this is how I grew up, and this is the kind of father that I watched growing up. And so I'm supposed to be this really spiritual and this really good kid, and a kid who everybody looked up to, but that wasn't really always my story. My dad served in a way that I've never seen anybody served before. He spent nights, weeks in jail for his faith. And with that, I was left alone a lot. I was left alone at home, either with the people, neighbors or people from church or whoever that is was to take care of me. And I don't know why, but when I was 9 years old, the number 9 kind of stuck out to me pretty sourly. When I was 9 years old, 3 things had happened to me in ways that had changed my life forever. So Dad and Mom was constantly out at night, traveling to villages, and I was left alone. And at the time, my older sister, was of age to get married. And so there was a seminarian, guy who traveled across the mountains and through the rivers, literally, to get to our place. And to be there to court my sister. And because we lived so far away, that he had a certain amount of months to be at our home to court her. And eventually she got to know him. She did not like him at all for whatever reason. I don't remember. But he was so angry of the rejection that one night I woke up and he was molesting me. And I didn't wake up, and it happened over and over and over again until I just laid there. And I would open my eyes, and I just remember, I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. And so when he left, I felt like, you know what? As a little girl, I was like, it's okay. He was a bad person. He did this to me. It's okay. It only happened once. In that same year, when I was 9 years old, my dad was building a pond, so we didn't have currency. We didn't use money, so we bartered, right? And he was building a pond to cultivate fish, to trade. And so we would have these guys from church, young, strong men from church to come help make the pond. And this man, young man, he was a son of a deacon at the church. And he came, worked, and he stayed, in the barn and in the guest house. And one night, again in my bed alone, I was pinned down to my bed, and he raped me. And I thank God I don't remember the pain. I just remember the images. I've always thought if I could just have a USB plug and plug it into my brain, I would have like a movie. I remember every single detail and everything that's ever happened. But thank God I don't remember the pain at all. So, and then for the third time, my brother came home from school, and he brought his best friend with him to come home and visit. And for the first time, I've never been kissed before. For the first time, I've had things in my mouth that weren't supposed to be there before I've even lost my first kiss. And that was something that disgusted me the most, more than the molestation and more than the rape. It was that kind of abuse that really hurt me. And so I grew up since 9 years old, up to 17 years old, carrying this shame and this guilt, thinking that because these things happened to me over and over and over again by different people, and that I am the common denominator, therefore there must be something wrong with me. Was I too outgoing of a kid? Was I too clingy? Was I too talkative? I don't know. I don't know what it was with me, but there was something wrong. Or else it wouldn't happen to me like that or that often, that much. And so, I grew up with that mentality. In 2005, my dad got sick with a stroke. So it didn't really help my faith at all to have all these things happen to me. Yes, I still served. Trust me, I still served. I still played the piano. I still sang. I still did all of this, that what a Christian girl was supposed to do, a pastor's kid was supposed to do. And in 2005, my dad got sick with a terrible stroke. And because of the place we lived in, there was no medical care at all. And so he's now left with half his brain is dead, and he's paralyzed. He can't speak. And the only things he really says is praise God and I'm happy. Literally, those are the two things he says. So, and I grew up with just a lot of hatred, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. So I went into high school. And this is where it gets really personal for me. I'm going to get raw and real with you today. When I stepped into high school, because of all these shame, and I thought, if my purity, if my virginity was robbed from me at such a young age, why do I need to fight it? Why do I need to fight for it? Why do I need to do anything about it anymore? So I gave myself away. I did. I gave myself away over and over and over again, whether it be emotional, physical, and I gave myself into pornography. And I gave myself into pornography, and that comes with masturbation. And this was an addiction that I've had for a long time. And if you look up the clinical definition of addiction, I was that. So I struggle with this. There were times when I would sin, and I would 30 minutes before, and I would go to church and I would play the piano. And I would come home before going to bed, I'd do it again. That was my life. I was living that kind of life for a very long time. And when you give yourself away like that, whether it be to yourself, to other people, to your phone, there's come a point where there's nothing left to give. And so one day I walked into my home and my mom was on the phone, and I was like, "Mom, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to?" Because I knew who she was talking to. She was talking to the seminarian that had molested me when I was little. She doesn't know. She didn't know. Now she knows. And I was so angry with her. I was so angry with her that I told her, "You would never talk to him again." And I told her why. And he called her. She called him and confronted him and said, "Did you do this to my daughter?" And on speakerphone, he said, "I did not do anything to her." And in that moment, it was when I said, these people are never going to ask for my forgiveness. These people are never going to reach out to me and say, "I'm sorry." These people are never going to do any of that. These people are never going to do whatever I have imagined them to do. And so I looked inside of myself and imagined this cup, and it was empty. Actually, it was filled with hatred, with anger, with resentment, with bitterness, all of these things. And that was the same thing that I was pouring out, because what gets poured in gets poured out. And so for the first time in years, I prayed. I said, "God, I can't go on like this. I can't go on bound and chained. And I don't want to feel this slimy feeling on my body every time somebody touches me. I couldn't let people touch me. I couldn't let people come close to me because I felt like I was going to get them dirty too." And that's how I felt. So God, help me. I don't know how, but just do something. Do something. And I didn't want kids. So for a long time, I was like, I don't want kids. But you know why? Because the abused become the abuser. I was abused. And for a long time, I said, I don't ever want kids, because if they were to be in my hands, they will probably get hurt. They will probably never have a good home. I will become the abuser. And because I abuse these people online, I abuse these 2D images, that I will abuse them too. And I said, no kids. I have a friend here. I don't want kids. I never want kids. And she didn't know why, but now she does. I don't want kids for that reason. And that was, a while ago. And I couldn't hold on to them. I felt like if I touched them, everything that I felt like I touched, I was going to get dirty. Like there was this thing about me that I felt like, have you ever held onto a frog and there's like that slimy feeling? That's how I feel all the time. And that's how I feel now, waking up from nightmares sometimes. So, I prayed for the first time in forever, and I said, God, help. I don't know how, but I know who. Well, I think I know who. So do something. And so when I went into college, I got into a very serious relationship. And at first it was really good. It was very God-centered. And eventually, it wasn't. And eventually, there was no faith in that relationship anymore. There was no God in that relationship anymore. And I had to make a choice. I was engaged to this person. I had to make a choice. And I said, God, I don't know what to do. Do I marry him, the love of my life? Or do I choose you? So I was taking my MCAT last year. The MCAT is the medical school test to get into med school. And this is in 2017. I've grown up with the Lord. I've mature a little bit with the Lord. And the week before my test, I had prayed, God, this test I can't do anymore. I can't cram any more things in my head. It's too much. It's 8 years of material. I can't. I surrender this to you. But I think God laughs. I really think he chuckled at me. I was like, huh, and you don't get to pick and choose what you surrender. That's not surrendering if you choose to surrender. It's not surrendering if you say, God, I will serve you when I'm 30 and married and 2 kids. God, I will do this and do that when this happens, when that happens. No. But I didn't know that at the time. A week before my MCAT, I said, God, I surrender my test to you. Please take care of this. I pass the baton on to you. The night before my test, my fiance walked in and he said, I think I'm an atheist. I don't know. Maybe. I don't believe in God anymore. So we talked. And in that moment, I remember I was wearing my ring and I took my ring off and I slid it across the table and I said, I refuse. I refuse to marry somebody who doesn't love Jesus. I refuse to love somebody who can't lead me spiritually. And I refuse to do this. I choose God. And for the first time, I walked my faith. For the first time, I let go of that boat and I walked on the waters. It wasn't easy. There's a lot of counseling. There's a lot of talking, but it wasn't easy. And that was when I said, I can do this. I can choose Christ. I have grown up to the point where he matters more to me than the things of this world. And you know what? Are the things of my past. And I believe that whatever I have truly been given and truly received, I can give it. So if I truly believe that I've received forgiveness, I can forgive. You know why? Because those hands that were pierced for me and nailed to the cross of Calvary, it happened for them too, my abusers. If I was able to be forgiven by my Father, they can too. So for a long time, I've always wanted to go back to Vietnam and ruin their lives, and find them out, and seek them out, and tell their wives and tell their kids, and ruin their reputation, just like they did for me. They ruined my life, a large part of it. But, and I gotta tell you today, I don't want to share this much, but 2 days ago, I just finalized my trip to Vietnam this year, Thanksgiving season, and I'm not even going back to see my family. I'm going back to build churches. I'm going back on a mission to go to villages like these, and I'm going to build churches. And I'm going to do what my father did, and I'm going to continue what he has done. And I'm not even going to care about my past. And so, all these shame and guilt that I've carried, if I truly believe that he can carry it for me, I've already handed over. And so I have handed everything else in my life over. I don't know how. I don't know whether or not I'll get into med school. I don't know whether or not I will get married or who I'm going to marry, but I know who is behind it all. The mastermind of it all is Christ. And I got to talk about my mom a little bit. I never had a good relationship with my mom. I've always blamed her for not ever protecting me. I say, why do you leave? Why do you have to go on those nights to Bible studies with Dad? Why couldn't he just go by himself? Why didn't you stay home with me? Why didn't you protect me like a mother would? I hated her. I've never spoken to her. She's never said, I love you. I've never said, I love you up to a certain point. We've never apologized to each other. We've never talked. And I knew in that prayer, said, God help me. I knew that I had to start with my mom. And so before I go into the living room every morning, literally this is what I would stop at my doorway and I say, God, today help me honor my mom. And it was so hard because I hated her for so long and she was there the whole time. And I was projecting all of my hatred and all of my bitterness onto her, and now I had to do different. What? I didn't know how. And so every morning I would go into the living room saying, God, please help me today because I can't do it. So at first, it would be just silence. It would just be completely silent. I would not respond. I just nod. Whatever she said, I just nod. I just nod. I just nod. And eventually it would be like, okay. Eventually it would be like, all right, I'm good. And eventually it was like, you have to understand, I did not have a conversation. I never talked to her. I lived in the same home with her for my entire life, and I never had a conversation with my mother. And one morning I woke up at 6 a.m. She was reading the Bible. I sat down across from her, and I was eating my breakfast. And I said, Mom, do you want some breakfast? And she said no. And she just kept reading. The next thing I knew, I looked up to the clock right behind her, and it was 11 a.m. And we've been in a conversation for the past 4 hours. And I didn't know how. And it was a moment of like, whoa, what happened? What did we even talk about? Like, what is this? You know? And ever since then, I realized during my breakup, my engagement, the break of my engagement, I realized that for the past 15 years, since my dad's been sick, she hasn't been pursued. She hasn't been loved. She's never even had sex. She's never been kissed. She has not had anything a spouse should have. And here I am hating her. And so I took on this role of pursuing my mother. So before I leave every morning, I would give her a kiss. And when I come home, I would give her a kiss. I cuddle, I don't know, flowers, whatever. I date my mom. Let's just say that. I date my mother. I really do. We go on walks. We garden together. I hate gardening, but we garden together. She grows her own vegetables. And, you know, I can't tell you that it's perfect. I can't tell you there are days when I would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, feeling icky. And the first thing I think about is my mom, in a bad way. But there is redemption and there is grace, sufficient enough for me, that it is enough for my mother. And then there was my sister, right? She was the one who turned the dude down. She's the one who said no. She was the one who made him so angry that he took it out on me. If she was to just marry him, if she just say yes, maybe he wouldn't have done the things that he did to me. So I hated her too. Every women figure in my life, I did not connect with at all. I refused. And when she had her kids, I couldn't even touch them. Imagine your niece and nephew, you're an aunt, and you couldn't even hold them. Because you feel like, first of all, you're going to make them dirty. Second of all, if you get too close, you might become an abuser. So, I just want to show the last two pictures I have on here. This is a picture of my niece and nephew and my mother. This is one of our dates down at the river. And we like to take walks a lot. I do a lot of walks. And so we do a lot of walks in our home. So this is the first time. See how old they are? She's almost as tall as me. But that was the first time I've held my niece and nephew. That was 2 years ago. That was 2 years ago. They went all through their lives not having an aunt, and I was there the whole time. And at first, it was maybe a kid in the future would be nice, you know. Maybe at 1 or 2, you know, my own kids. I think I'll be okay with that. But now it's God. However you want to give me, however you want to entrust me with, I'll take them. So that's the me then. That's the me now. It's still hard. It's still hard to be around kids. I can't say that it's not. It's still hard. I've still had to be very careful. And I still have to shut out the lies of the devil. I really do. I said, you know, back off. And when I talk to him out loud, I really do. Whenever I hear these things in my head about you're dirty and you're broken and your virginity is your purity, no. My purity is my purity, my virginity is my hymen. And when he's speaking these lies into my ears, I turned to it and I said, back off. I don't listen to you anymore because I've listened to you long enough. And so I'm going to spend the rest of my life making him pay for what he did to me. I'm going to spend the rest of my life empowering girls who I've shared the story with, and they say, that happened to me too. How can I get over this? How do I deal with this? I want to spend the rest of my life making him regret the story that he has laid out in front of me, and I'm going to use that. Every single dirt, every single rock, and every single stone that he's thrown my way. You know what those are? That's the same thing we used to build those churches. So the more dirt he throws at me, the more stones he's turning my way, those are just materials for God to use for his kingdom here on earth. So I'm going to use them, every last bit of them. And that's why I'm here today. Today is me using those dirt, those shame, those stones, those rocks that has hurt me. But now I'm going to throw it back at him and say, look what you have helped me do. So maybe a thank you is appropriate. I don't know. But yeah. And I've heard that for a bouncy ball to carry out its purpose is to bounce, right? For a bouncy ball to carry out its purpose, you can't just throw it against a couch who's cushioned. You throw it against the hardest surfaces you can. So for me to fulfill my purpose, to fulfill what God has put me here to do, not to make money, not to become some name, some title, but to glorify him with every story he's ever given me to tell. This isn't my story. This is his. And I'm going to tell it. This is his story of grace and of redemption and of love and of forgiveness. And I'm going to tell it. So I'm going to bounce. So throw me against the hardest wall you've got. So now every time I come across any kind of circumstances or hardship, I said, you know what? Throw it at me. Give me more of that dirt. Give me more of those rocks. Give me a little bit more. Because you know what? I know who can turn all of that into his kingdom here on earth. So that's my story. I believe that everything that you are going through, the things that you think that God can't forgive you for, or the things that you've bottled up all these years, the one thing you need to do is just to be raw and to be real. Because he will use the dirt and he will bring beauty out of ashes, all of it. So I pray that God reveals himself to you and you allow him to. So just maybe follow him a little bit. Let him borrow, my favorite part of chat messages is let him borrow your net and then your boat. And then a little bit of your time here, a little bit of your effort there. And eventually you can't help but leave it behind and just wholeheartedly follow him and say, God, I don't really care how I'm going to do the rest of my life. Financially, whatever it is, that you take it, you use it. And if I do this, if I get to do this every day, I get to tell your story every day, every season of my life, let it be. And so he's been a good God. And for every thoughts that you've ever had, he bled for that. The crown of thorns, he bled for the thoughts that you've had against people, against yourself. His nails pierced through hands for me, for things I did to my own body and to other people, for my abusers' hands. His nails pierced through the feet, where places where you shouldn't have been, to the gut, with things you feel against yourself, against other people, the bitterness and resentments. And then for all those times you've turned your back on him, daily, hourly, monthly, all those times you turn your back on him in any way, he's bled for that too. So I believe that his love is sufficient enough. If it's sufficient enough for me and all that shame that I carry, trust me, it is sufficient. It's enough for you. It's abundant for you. So let him change you. Let him help you. And you see the glory and the joy that comes out of it. So, yeah, I can't tell you that life is perfect. And I can't tell you that I have it all together. I still have doubts. But you know what my prayer is? God, I want to trust you more. So help me to want to trust you more. Because there are times when I don't want to trust him and I want to do it my own way, but help me want to love you. Help me want to follow you. And I pray the same for you. I pray that you just pick up your nets, your boats, whatever it is in your life. Eventually that you leave it behind and you follow him wholeheartedly. And let him use your story because it's not insignificant. Your story matters. So tell it. And I believe that he has a plan for you. And he asks you to be strong and courageous and be raw and be real. And there's no shame in that because he turned shame into glory. And he's done that for me. So if you can just bow down with me, and I would say a prayer, the band can come up. And I just pray for us, all of us, and for his love and grace and mercy to be abundant here today. Dad, my Father in heaven, clothed in glory and beauty. And you came out of that for me. You came out of that and took on flesh and took on human form to die for someone like me. And day after day I asked God, how? I don't understand why you would do that, but you did. And Father, I just thank you for your Son. For all the place that he's bled for me, and for all the things that I have done, for all the things that I have thought and held on to. Father, you bled for all of that, and you washed away all of my sins and all of our sins, Father. Nothing, whether angels or demons or anything on earth, authorities, rulers, can separate us from the love that you have for us, Father. I pray that we believe in that. I pray that your will be done in our lives, Father, that we allowed you to come into our hearts, sit on our thrones, and reign over us, Father. I pray that you use us to the very tip of our fingers, to the tip of our tongues, so we can proclaim your name higher and higher and higher, Father. Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name be the glory because of your love and because of your faithfulness, Father. And Father, that we use all of our dirt, that you use all of our shame, and you use all of our weaknesses, because in that we can boast your name. Father, I pray that you use us. Let us become devoted followers of you. Let us see how you can change lives. Reveal yourself to us in ways that we can't even imagine. Do what only you can do, Father. We love you. I love you. And like a child to her father, Father, would you protect us? Would you clothe us in glory and grace and mercy and joy and peace today? For you are the keeper of peace, and you keep your promises. Father, I love you. And in all these things I pray in your Son, your one and only Son's holy name. Amen.